So,
Welcome to the Podfather podcast. You can find all our episodes on podfather.me. You can also find my 6 other podcasts. You scan the QR code or go to roycon.com. If you're looking for a virtual assistant, go to va.world. My guest from New Jersey in the USA. He's a famous award-winning voice actor for video games, audiobooks, cartoons, commercials, and a few other things. He's been podcasting guest and also been involved with podcasting. He's an actor and a model, so those looking at YouTube, BitChute, Spotify, and Rumble can see his beautiful looks. Please welcome Chris Dattoli.
hello, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. I suppose let's obviously, the voice acting and everything, but let's touch on your kind of podcasting experience first, that, ones that you've been involved in and maybe perhaps the touring as well.
Sure. So, my background in podcasting, I started off, of course, with radio. Then, I went to voice acting, and podcasting was always like a big interest of mine. So I've been doing that for about 8 years now. Like professionally for 8 years. I always dabbled here and there. I've been a guest slash co-host on a podcast called the VO Meter, measuring your voiceover success, where we talk about, voiceovers. Been co-host and guest on a number of other ones. I actually have them right here if you want to give me a second. Apologies on that. Been part of like the creation, the ideas when I've been going out and hunting down different guests, vetting them, see which one would be more effective for what type of podcast. There's a podcast called Travel Pulse for a company called Travel Alliance Media. I've been the host and guest at the same time for that podcast as well. And yeah, have a lot of experience with that.
Have you kind of done intros for other shows? Is that part of your acting, voice acting?
Yes. Yes, I've done intro for a variety of podcasts. Some of the podcasts to go back a little bit that I've been a part of were the Absolutely Cosmic podcast, Professor Game podcast, Second Act Actors, Slasher Sports Cinema, Spark the Genius, The Goblin's Corner, just to name a few I've been involved with for voice acting. I will do the intro. I will do the commercials for the podcast because a lot of them, they get sponsorships and they don't like them. The hosts don't like reading the ads. So, they go and they ask me to go read the commercial for the ads. So that's what I do for them and do the outro for them. I also, for the back end side, I sort of write the interview questions for the guests and for the co-hosts. I share them with the guests and say, here are the questions I'm going to be asking you. If there's anyone that you feel uncomfortable discussing, please let me know. And I just edit them and send them to the podcast creator and the co-host.
And I'm not sure what happened there, but my computer just decided to shut the screen down, but you're still there, so I don't know with it closing.
Oh no.
Yeah, these things happen. So yeah, with writing the script that you said and the questions and stuff like that, because there's a few people have said that to me, sent things like that to me. I don't even look at them because I personally like it to be natural, but I know a lot of people, they're asking for that, they want that, they're afraid of it. What's your experience with that? Have you found that it actually helps have a better conversation?
So it gives, depending on what it is, I'm a big fan of going off the cuff, like you said. When I was on the VL meter, all the questions I asked were off the cuff because it gives a more, like you said, a more natural response. So it doesn't feel so like computer generated, if that makes sense at all. It doesn't sound more like robotic. Um, I, will say like, all right, so what's the topic for today? Here's this guest, what they've done their whole life. Here's some things, some accomplishments they have. What questions you want me to ask? And then I'll just say, all right, I'll come up with the questions with the director slash co-host slash host and just say, all right, here are the questions you want to ask. And I always say, here are the questions we're going to ask, but we're also going to be improvising a little bit, but it won't go too far off script. Some guests find that reassuring. Some guests prefer it that way. Some guests are like, oh yeah, sure, and a lot of them, but look good 40% of them don't even look at the questions and they're just like, oh, okay, no problem. Sorry, my phone just went off.
That's boredom was said something and that's keeping it real. Right now, that it was going to shut down. And you're like,
So that's what I find. When asking the questions off the cuff, it gives a little more. Sometimes there's a little bit of like an awkward pause between, the host and the interviewer. It's kind of like, oh, or the guest, I should say, like, oh, give me a second to think about that. So it's a little more editing in the background, but I kind of like that because it's again showing, it's being more real. Um, Sometimes I'll say like, hey, here are a few ideas I'm gonna say, or here are a few questions I might ask you to the guests. But this is completely off the cuff. If you want to think about it, go ahead. And here's or basically here's the topic I'm going to be talking about with you today. We're going to talking about, how video games can, or how Dungeons and Dragons can help inspire you to become an actor. And here's why.
So when I was doing the research for you, I was looking at a lot of the voice acting that you've done, whether in games or stuff. And your voice sounds familiar, especially like for ads in America and stuff like that. Because sometimes if you're watching something, ads will come on. I mean, I rarely watch the telly, but just say if it, yeah. So I know there's some of the big companies that you've done. So what ads have you done that people, or maybe the companies that people might know? Because for sure, it sounds like I've heard your voice before.
Absolutely. So I have done a few for Lowe's. I've done a few for Starbucks, Disney. Um, I'm drawing a blank. I guess I need more coffee, but there was one, I think it was called Hot Ones. It was for about the show directed by Eva Longoria about the guy who started the hot Cheetos, his story and everything. Flamin' Hot. That's it. Flamin' Hot. I did a few commercials for that. Manasquan Bank, Nickelodeon, I've done Cartoon Network, and I'm trying to think a few big ones. Yeah, that's just to name a few of what I've done. Oh, NFL Network, I've done. And yeah.
No, excellent. And like with you've done audiobooks as well. And I suppose where I want to kind of go with this, I want to kind of one for people to protect their voice. I suppose let's start off with that because sometimes like there's some podcasters they're doing 5 shows a day and they're over there.
Yeah.
How should they protect their voice? Because I know you've done a lot of training and everything. So you
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I'm a big fan of warm-ups every single morning. As soon as I wake up, I chug about a 16-ounce glass of water to one, wake up my organs, but it takes 2 hours for that to go through the body. So I wake up, have a glass of water, then I start throughout the day, and especially in the morning, I do vocal warm-ups. I took choir when I was in middle school, high school, and in college, Glee Club. So a lot of the voice exercises we do there, flows well with voice acting. There's a lot of tongue twisters that I do, and also I just keep hydrating. I will drink tea too because coffee. I do have a cup of coffee. Not like I'm completely against coffee. I love coffee, especially black coffee. But that also kind of messes with your voice a little bit because it creates a lot of that sound. So I'll have tea. I'll also there is a group I'm a part of called the VO Peeps. She sells a vocal throat spray that I have right here. This was actually made in the mind of heavy metal singers because they do a lot of screaming. And a great testimonial. I gave this to one of my good friends who's in a heavy metal band, and he said, "Dude, I could go all day with this. So like, try it out." I'm like, "All right." So like, that was like a best testimonial I ever got. So I just spray this. It works well. There's also I believe it's a Chinese syrup. Forgive me if I butcher the name, everyone out there, but I think it's called Neem Po Pai. It's also called Hulk juice because Fred Tetzscore does the voice of Hulk. He uses it, and it sort of like coats your throat and helps you like scream a lot more. There's also a lot of nasal exercises that I do, and there's a lot of as weird as it sounds, a lot of tongue exercises that I do. That really, and I find like every time when I'm done doing a session, I'll just take some water, warm up my voice a little bit, and when I'm done, I don't talk, which annoys the hell out of my family because I'll be like, can't talk. I don't whisper because that actually hurts the voice more, and I still do more and more warm ups, which again annoys the hell out of my family because I don't know where they'll hear me just going, Why in the world would a whale want water? When a whale wants water, will a whale want dry? Why in the world would a wet whale want wet water? When a wet whale wants wet water, will wet whales dry? And I'll just do a bunch of tongue twisters like that. And they'll just be like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm like, just keep my voice in tip top shape. And I'll make sure to take uh, breaks throughout the day. Be like, all right, vocal rest right now. I really need time to kind of, one, meditate on my day, but two, also I need to relax my voice. This is sort of like if you're going to the gym, you got to warm up your muscles and you have to rest in between and you have to take care of them. If you don't, you injure them and then everyone's in trouble.
I'm used sometimes because I've got 6 shows. There was times that people would just book a lot and I could have 5 and I was just exhausted. No, it's max that people can kind of book in 3 in the calendar, and I'm even thinking of taking that to 2. But I found even after, especially if you have a later one, you're exhausted, but then overtired. And what's funny, I was looking at your TikTok where you weren't doing the editing on one of your shows, and so I think we need to listen to about. So, like you said, not to be talking and stuff like that. But have you found that, like, is there a certain amount of hours, or does it vary from person that knocked over? Because, like as I said earlier, there's some people, they're trying to churn out as many as they can to get to the top of charts, which maybe they're doing damage to themselves.
It's an acquired skill because it's time management, and I come from a military household. My father to this day wakes up at the exact same time, does the same thing at this time wakes up, I think 4, or if he's sleeping in 5 a.m. Doesn't matter if it's the weekday or weekend. That's what he does. I know for a fact I'll find him in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee at 5:30 every single time. And he'll get up and go to work, or he'll just, do a few miscellaneous things around the house. And then he always came home. There were a few exceptions, but he always came home at the exact same time, no matter what he was doing. Always had his routine, and then always went to bed at the exact same time. Of course, a few exceptions. Weekends, he stood up a little bit later. And I just sort of adopted that because I say, all right, from this time to this time, this is when I'm working on projects. If there's a few auditions that pop up, I'll just jump in the booth and do them real quick because a few of my agents, since I'm based on the East Coast, a lot of my agents are on the West Coast. So there's a 3-hour time difference and they're 3 hours behind me. So where it's, 9 o'clock my time, it's 6 o'clock their time. So they're still sending me auditions. So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll quickly do this. So I will try to not do as many auditions at night because I want to spend time with my family. I want to, ask them about their day, spend time with my newborn, help my wife out. And if I know for a fact I'm exhausted, like I know like I can't take an intense session, I'll just go to bed early and I'll wake up super early the next day, usually around 5 a.m. and for an hour, do my exercises and then start and then record everything. So I would say, like, trust your body. It takes a long time to understand your strength and weaknesses of your body, know where your limits are. And once you reach that limit, you can't push anymore. And I know when I made that video on TikTok, I said, it gets to a point where you're just so tired. I couldn't say it was for a local company in Jersey that I was trying to say bald face Hornets, and I couldn't say the D. It was just ball. And I'm like, all right, I'm done. Like that's when I know, like, I realized it just once I'm making more and more mistakes, once things get a little blurry, I'm like, all right, I'm doing a disservice to myself by pushing myself because it's not the best version of me. It's not the best quality. My best bet is to, if possible, stop and just do it the next day, get some rest.
And yeah, you mentioned you have a newborn because I was listening to one of the shows and you were saying, your wife was due. So yeah, congratulations on that. That's the best joy. And as it goes along, it puts a smile to your face. It becomes the meaning for life is when you actually, spend time with your children. There's nothing more beautiful. So do you do your sound and your work and stuff like that at home, or do you go to an office?
So about 80% of it's in my home studio. I have pretty much everything I need. Studio's professional. It's what I'm right now. I have something called Source Connect, the paid version, in which I can do work with clients. It's an industry standard right now. My microphones are industry standard. I acquired them throughout the years. But there are times where for voiceover work where they say you have to come to LA or you have to come to Texas. I actually have another home in Texas. I'm not super rich or anything. It's just my father had a property in Texas, and I'll actually go there a few months throughout the year because I love Texas. Um, and so a lot of times I'll be doing work in Texas. I'll have to travel out there, or I'll have to go to New York for. It's only because they're approved studios. So when they say like, oh, like you have to come to LA because this is a vetted studio with this company that the company vetted. So they only want recordings out of there, despite if you have a professional studio, whatever. So, since it used to be sort of a thing before the pandemic, once the pandemic happened, a lot of people are recording even more out of their home studios. Not like it didn't happen before, but it became more and more frequent. Just if you have a home studio, here's what the gear you need to have, here's the equipment you need to have. So I would say probably 80% of my work is done in my studio. A lot of the voiceover work I will have to travel to. Anything on camera work that I do, I obviously that I have to travel for.
And is you're inside in it? No, that's not a green screen that I'm looking at there.
Nope, this is actually my
So if the baby is crying, then does it get through? Do you have to do editing, or how good is it?
So I'm fortunate that I'm located in my office, which is it's another floor in my home. I'm actually
You're telling us no, you're not rich, but the house is so big that the child is.
Yeah. It's not a big house. It's just it's what's called the split level. So it's just sort of like the basement, if you will. But my wife and my newborn are right above me, so I do hear my wife walking sometimes. Unfortunately, this used to be a garage, and they turned it into another bedroom, which the homeowners before me. So I turned it into an office, and I'm currently re-insulating the walls and everything, getting new windows installed that are tempered glass, just to be a little more soundproof. Because because even though in my booth, it's very, very, very fainted. I am very happy about that. But every now and then you'll hear a footstep. Every now and then, especially during the summer, you'll hear lawnmowers. You'll hear weed whackers, which is our worst enemy. I live where I started when I moved in. There was a home down the road that they were doing construction, so constantly I would hear construction vehicles. And of course, it was one of those homes that had to be on lifted because Hurricane Sandy that hit Jersey a while back did a lot of damage. So now all homes that are in a flood zone have to be lifted. So I constantly heard that. I was very fortunate. I live on the end of the street where no one gets flooded. So I also built acoustic panels that I have installed throughout the office. You can purchase them, but a friend of mine, Carl, he showed a video on how you can make them. So I just make them homemade. And that helps with the acoustic treatment with the room, the reverb and everything.
And the mics, I see the mic. Obviously, you have a different mic behind you for if you're standing up or whatever. So what mics do you actually use? What make with it?
So that one right there is the Sennheiser MK16. It's a shotgun mic. It's an industry standard. I also have the Sennheiser MK4, which is the equivalent of the Neumann TLM 102. I also have the Neumann TLM 102 and 103. I'm part of a group on Facebook where they do a lot of gear exchanges where people are selling like, hey, here's a microphone. Like, I don't need it anymore. I got this mic. It's not really fitted for my voice. Instead of selling it for $3,000, so like I'll sell it for $1,200. Or this is actually how I got my studio. Someone about 6 hours, away from me was like, listen, I'm selling the booth. It's $800. Anyone want it? And I said, so I made the drive to go pick it up, and I just took down the panels because they were deteriorating, the foam panels, and I put up acoustic treated blankets, and I also put new acoustic panels behind it, and I also put moving blankets on the ground, so everything's pretty much soundproof. I put bass traps in the corner. I might have done a little overboard with that, but yeah, that's how I treated my studio.
And with editing then the audio, I mean, obviously if you're going to a studio in LA or something like that, they're probably doing all the stuff, but when you're doing it, like the TikTok that I saw, what software are you using?
So with voice acting, it's Adobe Audition. I've been using it for years. There's also a free program called Audacity that I recommend. I also use Reaper for my iPad. And when I'm voice acting, I do very little editing with it and may boost the audio a little bit. Or, hey, let's say if the day I'm recording, we're doing construction. So you hear that in the background. I might do like a little filter to kind of edit that out because when it comes to auditions, I like them to be as raw and natural as possible. That way they could hear the quality of my booth and say, I don't have to come into the studio. They can say, oh, we only accept talent that have a professional studio. Well, here's my auditions in a professional studio, you know, no editing at all or very little editing. And that helps out tremendously because a lot more, it seems a trend nowadays is they don't want to hear a lot of processing, a lot of declicking, a lot of the filtering with your auditions. They want it to be as raw as natural and project. With it comes to recording big projects like video games, audiobooks, or animation. Sometimes I'll do the recording and I'll just send them the files raw. Sometimes I'll send them to raw and do a little bit of editing, excuse me. That way they can hear both versions. And it's pretty much, I'm fortunate that, I just record and send it to them a lot of times. With it comes to on-camera work, there's a program. I mean, I don't go crazy with it because a lot of it's auditions, unless I'm doing like UGC content. I just use my phone and I use a software called iMovie. It came with my MacBook. There's also, I also have Adobe Adobe Premiere Pro that I use. That just came with the Photoshop that I have. Photoshop, excuse me, Adobe Audition. That it came with it, so I just use that as well. And I also have two lights that I purchased. They're newer, NEWEER, that I use. And I also have a little backdrop that I record my on-camera auditions with. Just a blue background because they prefer, like, if you're on a plain background with nothing, they don't want to see pictures on the wall. They don't want to see pictures of your family or windows or anything. So I made sure to set up everything to look pretty much almost professional, nothing studio quality because it is just an audition, and that's what I'll utilize.
Excellent. So I'm trying to keep the podcasters in the game because unfortunately a lot of them, they throw on the towel. And I think the main reason is they come into it thinking they're going to be like Joe Rogan and the Spotify is going to just throw millions of dollars at them, but that doesn't happen. And I know that some look at actually doing introductions for people, maybe audiobooks and stuff like that. You're at a different level because obviously you're experienced the clientele that you've done and that you've mentioned. But when somebody is starting off, like, they don't know how to price themselves because one, they could be overpricing themselves, or two, they could be going in at 20%. How do you navigate that?
So I would always say, do your research. There's another website called Reverb where they actually sell audio equipment that's perfect for podcasting at a reduced price. And there's nothing at all wrong with it. Like I mentioned, these microphones, there's a group I'm part of called the VO Gear Exchange. Like the Sennheiser I know goes for over $1,000. I got it for $400 because the guy said, I have 4 of them. I don't need 4. They're in perfect condition in a non-smoking household. Look for deals on audio equipment. I always suggest do your research. And most importantly, what I did is I actually rented an hour time of a professional studio nearby. That's a recording studio for music and what have you. And I said, what microphones do you have? I like to try out a variety of microphones to see, what's best suited for my voice. So I went and I did that. I tried out a bunch of microphones and I said, all right. And I asked for the recordings afterward. And then I said, all right, this mic, I sound like this with this mic. This mic, I don't sound well. And I like the way it sounds in my voice. So that's how I made my purchasing decisions. And I, again, see, there's different groups out there with podcasters that are selling some of their equipment, whether it's acoustic panels or anything. If you want like a real affordable, I don't want to say cheap, but cost-effective solution for acoustic treatment, you can go to Harbor Freight or any hardware store and buy some moving blankets and make a little makeshift booth out of that. The first booth I made, I actually used PVC piping and a bunch of moving blankets. It was in my old apartment bedroom. It was on a carpeted floor near a closet where I had the padding in my closet as well. and I recorded one of my demos in there. And that demo actually won an award. So, it does, that cost me maybe $20. I'm sure nowadays the price, have increased and everything. So that's really a cost effective way to just save a lot of money just using moving blankets. Eventually I upgraded to, the acoustic blankets and everything else in my studio. But again, I purchased them from a VO Gear Exchange, or I just did research and I joined a lot of voice acting academies where they say, hey, students get discounts on this, or hey, for attending our webinar, you got a discount on these products, so you could use them at your will. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Like, or like, oh, hey, if you purchase X amount of stuff, if you want to get in with someone who's also starting a podcast, I did that with a few other podcasts where I'm like, hey, we're getting together, we want to purchase a bunch of stuff. Do you want anything? That way we can all get a bigger discount. And we did. And then it also saves money. So team up with people to help you out.
Just like I use like coupon things as well, for no matter what, whether it's software or something like that, it's automatically on my system. And even for domain names, you get the privacy part, free. I mean, I've got so many different domains, but with when you're then trying to earn, right? So there's people, they're getting customers, they're going out and they're maybe say an audiobook, they're pitching for an audiobook, or they're pitching to do an intro and an outro, and they haven't a clue what price to charge for their services. How can they navigate? You're at a different level than they would be because you've done so much. But how should they do it? Because, it's kind of, especially if it's new to them, because they can obviously, when they get to a certain level, then they get a lot of demand, they increase it. But when they're starting off, they don't want to be charging like, going way, way underboard, or not getting it because they're thinking that the normal price is X per hour or whatever way it's done.
Absolutely. So when I come to charging and everything, there's actually a rate guide that I use from a website called the Global Voice Acting Academy. They have a rate guide that they use, and they actually have podcasts on there too, what to charge for podcasts and everything. Again, do your research, look what the industry standard is when charging people for podcasts or asking customers for sponsorships and everything. Talk to different competitor. No, I don't want to say competitors, just talk to as many professionals who've been doing it for X amount of years to figure out, hey, what do you charge for this? Or what are your expertises? Attend a lot of classes. And also remember, never undersell yourself. I know starting off, you're going to start doing that. You're going to like, oh, I really want this customer. So instead of charging, let's say $300, I only charge $150 just so I can have them and everything. But you're really underselling your services. You're doing yourself a disservice. So it's great you got that client. It's good for marketing, but your bills don't care that you networked and you got a great customer. They just care that they're paid on time. So I just network with a lot of professionals. Do your research and find out what the industry standard for charging people are. I always again go back to the Global Voice Acting Academy rate guide. That helps me out tremendously. And once you charge your customers, become standard and set your price with it. Don't undersell yourself. Figure out, all right, how much should I pay for all this stuff? What is a realistic price I can come together and charge a customer for this without them being offended? And also remember, it is your time. It is your work. This is, your livelihood. So don't don't undersell yourself with that. Charge your rates, stick to them. If a customer is upset with like that, another trick that I do, I always ask people when they say, well, how much do you charge for voiceover? I say, well, what's your budget? Like, what's your, I take a lot of sales courses, marketing classes out there, because I've been in the marketing field for 14 years as well. So I understand about, cold email, and also take salesman roles and everything. There's actually a company called Treehouse Marketing where they have salesman courses. And it's for like, homeowners, for like services like roofing, crawl space encapsulation. But their strategy for a salesman, it flows through. And they say, whoever speaks first loses, And so they asked me like, oh, what do you charge for voiceover rate? What's your budget? What are you looking to get? Like, what's like, I want to understand your project a little more, hey, we want to be guesting your podcast or we want to sponsor it. All right, what are you looking to, what kind of partnership do you want to work together? Do you want me to sell your services? Do you want like a mention every 15 every 3.5 minutes of my podcast, do you want to mention your product? Do you want like certain highlights on different things? Like, what are you trying to get? And, use that when it comes to your pricing. They say, oh, I want this mentioned every 5 minutes, or, oh, hey, for an outro, this is what I want. I want it to be this long. I want it to be this many words. I want you to mention this. Oh, and it's going to change X amount of time. So, I want you to be flexible with revisions. All right, well, here's my price with that.
With audiobooks then, because I'm not sure last I heard, but that was a 4-month episode. It was 15. There might be more now, but I'd love to know it kind of for if someone's thinking of doing that, because there's obviously probably people you just do the recording and send it on, and there's maybe perhaps you have to do the full editing. And is it done per kind of 100 pages or per word? Because I mean, some books there's so many, there's some books that I read and you need the magnifying glass to read it. And there's others I could read it from across the room. So is it priced per word, or how is it priced? And like, do you then allow the time that you think that would kind of your rate as such?
Absolutely. So there's different prices. So if it's I do it per hour. So if it's per raw, like no editing whatsoever, I charge, about $225 per hour, per raw hour. If it's editing that I have to do, it's per finished hour. So that could be between $200 to $500 per finished hour, depending on how long the book is. If it's a 2-hour book, I'll go a little more on the low end. If it's a 14-hour book that I got to sit there, because it's going to take you double, if not triple the amount of time to edit everything, because if you don't have an editor. So, or you could do a hybrid agreement, which is royalty share plus an X amount. So I'll do, let's say for a hybrid agreement, it's $100 per finished hour plus a royalty agreement. So royalty share. So I get 5% of your sales or something like that. If you're doing a add-on, or you have to hire a audio editor, which is what I did. Unfortunately, he retired, so I can't use the services anymore. I would say, all right, all right, this book, it's, for example, $325. All right, I got to hire an editor. All right, he's $75 an hour. So I'm like, all right, so it's going to be about $400 an hour. So per finished hour. So I record and I send it to my editor, and he'll just say, oh, hey, by the way, you messed up on this line. You got to redo this. I'm like, hey, there was some noise here. You got to redo this. And he was quick too, which is so sad. Why I was heartbroken when he retired, because he was so good and he took audio engineering. So look for an audio engineer to help you with that and find out what their rate is and include it in the pricing. So some people, what was wonderful with him is him and I had an agreement, and he said, listen, if you can bring me like X amount of audiobooks per month, here's what I'm going to charge you, and I'm like, all right, perfect. I'll work that into my pricing. Like I would bring him about 5 audiobooks a month, and he'd be like, oh, dude, this is perfect. That's what I need. Tell you what, I'll charge you $50. Like, this is for me and him. Like, I'll $50 per hour. Add that to your pricing. You're good, buddy. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So whatever my pricing was, I just add an extra $50 and include that in the price. So when it comes, sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, that's all relevant. It's very good.
Yeah, if you're doing all the editing yourself, make sure you pay yourself the job of an audio engineer. So include that in your pricing, because like I said, it's going to take double, if not triple the amount of time. So if you're doing a 1-hour book, it take maybe 3 hours, depending, because you're going to hear a few you have to have a keen ear for hearing any audio disruptions in the background. And if you're doing a 14-hour book, well, first of all, God help you, but all, because it's going to take you like double the amount of time. It's going to be 28 hours. You're going to be working on the audio editing. And a lot of people, when recording audiobooks, they use a clicker. So they'll notice, so if they mess up, they'll do a clicker, and you'll see that in the audio lines. You'll be like, all right, here's where I messed up. Or there's something called punch and roll, which one of my good friends and coach, Roy Yokelson, taught me about auditing in Adobe Audition. That way, it's sort of like, if you mess up in a line, you could stop and go back a little bit, and it'll pick up where you started off and just record where you messed up. So it won't screw up anything you did previously, but you'll continue off, and that way it's less editing in the future. I always recommend people take an Adobe Audition class with him. He's incredible.
That clicker is a handy one. I didn't have a clicker if I was recording. I just give a clap so I see the spike in the frequency.
Yeah. I actually used to use a Snapple bottle, the Snapple bottle caps. I'm like, all right, But yeah, a lot of people use a clicker so they can go back and just finish recording. I'm very big. If I messed up, let me stop where I'm at because it does less work in the future. I'm all about fixing my mistakes right then and there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just with the royalty, because I've heard of some people, they do different things with the royalty. Sometimes like they're not paying and then they're doing the royalty. I understand if it's done through kind of blockchain technology, that if the royalties come in automatically, but sometimes you're kind of relying on someone to pay the check. Is there ways of protecting yourself? Because what I've noticed is when things are okay, small and whatever, there's no problem. But if it takes off, then they're less inclined to give you your commission. Is there a way to protect yourself?
Yes, I definitely include a writer for every audiobook, a writer that I include for every audiobook that I do. Have a contract ready. Look for different examples. There's a lot of audiobook coaches. Take time with them and say, hey, listen, I like to pick your brain. Let's say, ask them the exact questions. Like, how would you protect yourself? Or there's a lot of resources on YouTube. You can look up Johnny Heller, Scott Brick, who are very big in the audiobook industry. And, see like, well, what do you do to protect yourself? I was definitely going to contract to say like, hey, if we're doing royalty share, here's my rate and here's what I like on total. That's why you need to take a business class and a salesman class, a marketing class, just to kind of understand and protect yourself because you're starting your own business. So you definitely need something to, you need it from you to understand the industry and everything and, business ethics. So definitely something to protect yourself. They shouldn't be offended by that because they want your voice, the customer. So, like, hey, listen, here's, show it to your attorneys. I'll show it to mine. You can be yourself or you can hire an attorney. And, here's what we can do to protect ourselves and work together. And that guarantees like, all right, here's the writer saying you're never going to use my work more than this. Here's like the distribution of my voice and watch out for this one word, in perpetuity. Watch out for that word. That means they own your voice forever. I'm not a fan of that. So
Especially with AI, because they can use your voice now and they could even do an audio again. Are you afraid of the A? And way I ask is at one stage, because I get a lot of kind of beta testing because of my shows and all this stuff. And one of the guys was doing, like say little clips. He was going to do them in Spanish. And I sent, and they were so good. And it was like even looking at me, but the voice was my voice and the thing. But I know that they could even record me in English doing something else. And where do you see it going? It's scary
so
because there's so many professions that are going to be lost. And I'm just wondering what's your thoughts on that?
so it definitely is a gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You just have to understand there has been a number of jobs that I've lost because of AI, but they also contacted me back and said, listen, we want to use your voice again. We made a mistake with AI. So I'm not incredibly threatened about it. I'm understanding it, but to protect yourself, there's a group I'm part of called NAVA, the National Association of Voice Actors, where they actually have an AI writer that protects you, saying like, you will not use my voice to train for AI. You will not to really protect yourself fully from AI. You're not going to use it to train AI. I'm not going to be associated at all with AI. So that protects you. And I definitely, on top of your contract, whatever project you do, make sure you include that. So anytime I'm doing work with an indie studio, I say, here's an AI writer. Would you mind signing it? It's just saying you're not going to use my voice for any type of AI training, especially if it's in perpetuity, because sometimes you can't escape that. So I said, this is going to protect me. I don't want my voice because that happened to a voice actor. I believe it was Bev Standing, who with TikTok. She did work for a Chinese company and they sold her voice to TikTok. And her voice was like the one doing the dubbing for all the videos originally. And, she was losing work because, people were using it for not appropriate things for their TikTok videos. And, she sued TikTok and they reached an agreement with that. So that's where the AI writer came into effect because of that to protect yourself. So make sure you have an AI writer to help yourself, to protect yourself.
First, thoroughly enjoyed it. You've shared very valuable tips. You might let people know where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can check me out on social media. All my social media channels have the same handle. It's at Chris Dattoli VO. Chris, Chris, Dattoli, Dattoli VO. You can also check out my website, thetolivoiceovers.com. I'm going to be appearing at a few conventions lately. That's going to be listed on my website. And yeah, I love to network. I love helping people out, whether it's podcasting or in the voice acting or acting field. I love everything about that. It's such a great, fun field. And I always like to just leave people with this quote: growing up is inevitable. Growing old is inevitable. Growing up is optional. Never lose your inner child. Follow your dreams. It may take a little while, but hard work pays off. Dreams come true.
The thing is, with your newborn, that keeps you young. That's what I feel. It just keeps you young, and that's the joy of totally agree with what you just. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep. So that's all for the Podfather, and also the Speaking Podcast, because I think all of the information that was shared will benefit that audience as well. You find all my podcasts on roycon.com or scan the QR code. If you're looking for a virtual assistant, go to va.world. Sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends, because there's a lot of valuable content there for people to benefit from. Until next week, take care.